Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my updated college basketball Bracketology 3.0. Here as we trudge into February, I'm going to be going through all the seed lines, all the tournaments, the composite, overall rankings, and also taking a look at some of the analytical rankings along with a few different brackets. So, beginning with the bracket matrix where they throw all the brackets together, you can see there's a consensus top three here. Clearly, Purdue, UConn, and Houston. Nobody has those teams ranked anywhere other than on the one line. And then you do also have North Carolina, who's kind of right now, I would still say, the fourth number one, even after the recent loss. Maybe Tennessee creeping up, maybe Arizona. They barely won in triple overtime on the road at Utah last night. Utah's a very tough place to play. A decent win for Arizona, but you can see the two line right now: Tennessee, Arizona, Marquette firmly on the two line, and also Kansas. The three line: Wisconsin losing 3 games here recently. Baylor, Alabama, they got crushed by Auburn, but they're still maybe trending to the 4 line. This was updated recently, but some of these polls weren't updated after Alabama got crushed by Auburn. Iowa State also on the 3 line, just barely. I would be very wary of Iowa State just because they tend to play really well at home. And obviously, March Madness is neutral court. You do have Illinois possibly creeping up to the 3 line. You can see their composite at 3.8, Iowa State at 3.6. So those teams are really interchangeable on the 3-4 line. Duke sitting as a 4 seed, Auburn sitting as a 4 seed, but trending up. They finally got a big win against Alabama. Dayton sitting in the A10 as a 4 seed right now. That's a really good rank for them. You can see Creighton, San Diego State, BYU. How about BYU in the Big 12? A sneaky potential 3 seed. They've got some very winnable games coming up, but the Big 12, it is a tough conference. South Carolina also on the 5 line. They've won a bunch recently. I'd be a little bit wary of South Carolina. They're winning, but when you look at their analytics, the analytics don't love them. Some of their games are close. Kentucky sitting on the 6 line. Horrible defense, good offense, horrible defense. I think they could make the Sweet 16, but no further. FAU sitting on the 6 line, very inconsistent. Utah State, the loaded Mountain West, and then Oklahoma. I am not a fan of Oklahoma. I am not a fan of Wisconsin. I think both of those teams will be losing early. Moving on to the 7 line, Colorado State. They've had a very nice year out of the Mountain West. Texas Tech, not very high on Texas Tech. Clemson and TCU, kind of a mid-ACC team and a mid-Big 12 team. Although TCU, they've had a nice year. Utah on the 8 line, that was a tough 3 overtime loss to Arizona. Utah is another team that plays really well at home, just like Iowa State, but they don't play well anywhere else. New Mexico sitting on the 8 line. St. Mary's quietly sneaking up. They've had a really nice resurgence recently. Boise State moving to the 9 line. You do have Texas, Northwestern, MSU, so that's going to be the team nobody wants to face. And then also Nebraska sitting on the 9 line, possibly facing an 8 seed. And then if they win that, they will be facing a 1 seed. On the 10 line, Ole Miss, A&M. How about A&M inserting themselves back into the tournament? Indiana State, certainly a team a lot of us are looking at as a potential Cinderella Elite Eight type team. Indiana State, very good offense, probably going to finish the season 28-3. They're favorited in every game remaining, probably going to finish the season ranked as well. Mississippi State on the 10 line. Butler, St. John's in the tournament because their analytics are amazing. That's why they're in, even with the bad record. Virginia, annoying team to face, really good on defense. They slow the pace down. Washington State getting a shout out, possibly in a play-in game. And then you do have Florida as well out of the SEC. The 12 line, Seton Hall, Cincinnati, Grand Canyon. A lot of people love Grand Canyon. They've got a great record. Appalachian State and McNeese with Will Wade. Cornell possibly getting in over Princeton. Everyone was talking about Princeton. They made a run last year. How about Cornell? They're very good out of the Ivy. UC Irvine's getting a lot of hype. Samford out of the Southern, and La Tech out of Conference USA. Akron possibly an auto bid from the MAC. Vermont, Morehead State, and High Point now up to a 14 seed. So they were a 15 seed for the longest time. Now High Point is a 14 seed. How about Drexel on the 15 line? Possibly on the 14 line if you look. They're very close. Eastern Washington, Oakland University out of the horizon, and of course Colgate. And then the 16 line, Quinnipiac, the pollster. That's pathetic. South Dakota State, Eastern Kentucky, Norfolk State Southern, and Central Connecticut State. I would imagine the teams that would get buys out of the 16 seeds would be Quinnipiac and South Dakota State. And then you can see who's just missing out. Other at-large bids: Providence, Colorado, Richmond, Nevada. Boy, Memphis has really fallen off. Gonzaga, firmly on the outside looking in at this point. Wake Forest, Villanova, and then a few other teams. Oregon getting a shout-out. Xavier getting a shout out, and so is Drake. And then these are just the other auto qualifiers that people think are going to win. You can understand Princeton, 27 brackets, James Madison, they're really streaky. How about Charlotte out of the American, South Florida, also Yale. Yeah, the Ivy's pretty good this year with those three teams. Cornell, Princeton, and Yale. Toledo out of the MAC. You can see also Merrimack, 45 brackets they're in, although those are just auto bids. Let's go to the analytics. So the analytics right now still do like Houston as the number one overall team in the nation with the number one defense. Purdue sitting at number two. Auburn is loved. That win against Alabama definitely helped them because Alabama is also highly valued by the analytics. And then UConn, the current AP number one team, down at number 4. You also do have Tennessee. I think they're a solid Elite Eight team this year. We'll see what bracket they get, maybe Final Four. Arizona, there's going to be a lot of people, and maybe me included, that pick Purdue and Arizona to go very far because we see their analytics, we see them this year after last year, and we think they're due for a deep run after the upset first round losses. Look for people to be predicting Purdue to the Final Four and also possibly Arizona to the Final Four as well. Iowa State number 7, a lot of that is due to early season blowout wins against bad teams. I do not think they're that good, but the analytics like them because they had a bad non-conference schedule and they destroyed a lot of bad teams. Alabama sitting at number 8. Alabama's a little bit streaky. You know, early in the season, they had a really tough non-conference schedule. They brought it together, and then they got crushed by Auburn. We'll see with Alabama. They do have Mark Sears, a really good player, possibly, you know, maybe top 5 or top 6 in terms of National Player of the Year. Kansas is the number 9 team. They're uber talented. I think they're a free pick to go to the Sweet 16 minimum. BYU, I like BYU. I don't want to pick on them, but I could see them getting upset early. Marquette, North Carolina, who's right now a 1 seed, but the analytics don't love them. Illinois, St. Mary's, and how about Michigan State, who's sitting on the 8 or 9 line inside of the top 15 in terms of the analytics, even in front of Wisconsin, who I think Wisconsin's probably going to fall back to a 5v12 game and then lose to the 12. Personally, New Mexico, Baylor, a very solid team, Duke, Creighton, and then there is Dayton at 21. You've got Gonzaga at 22. So, you know, Gonzaga is still valued analytically. San Diego State at 23, St. John's, there they are at 9 losses at number 24. There you can see Kentucky, the defense, 129th on defense, 4th on offense. Wake Forest, yeah, Wake Forest is an under-the-radar team that I'm watching. I'm liking what I'm seeing from Wake Forest out of the ACC. Florida at 27, Oklahoma. How about Oklahoma all the way down at 28, below Florida and Wake Forest? You do have Texas, who's kind of been, Texas has been really mid this year. It's a tough conference, though, and then there's Indiana State right now, 12-1 in conference play, 21-3, the number 12 best offense in college basketball. All right, this is a good gauge based on, you know, the teams, possibly their seed lines right now versus where they are analytically. You can take a look at the seeds and then where right next to their name on the right where they are analytically. So Purdue, possibly the number 1 overall seed. You can see Purdue, UConn, Houston, North Carolina. A lot of people in agreement on those top 4. Arizona as a 2 seed, Tennessee, Marquette, and then Kansas, Dayton on the 3 line, Auburn on the 3 line. How about Auburn, number 3 team in the country analytically, at least according to these analytics, and then Baylor really lagging behind the number 24 team analytically, but they are on the 3 line along with Iowa State. Wisconsin on the 4 line, San Diego State, South Carolina, 53rd in terms of analytics, but on the 4 line because they are deserving based off of a really good record. Illinois also on the 4 line. Alabama, you do have sitting on the 5 line. They would be a behemoth 5 seed. Colorado State, Duke, and Clemson. I think Clemson would lose to a 12. Oklahoma, BYU, Northwestern on the 6 line. along with Utah State, TCU, Indiana State. So they have Indiana State a lot higher. Yeah, I like Indiana State right now as a 7 seed. They could possibly even move up all the way to a 4 seed if they win out. If Indiana State wins out, they're probably going to be a 3 or a 4 seed. Boise State and Creighton, Utah on the 8 line, New Mexico, Washington State, Virginia. They've been winning a bunch recently. You do have Texas Tech, St. Mary's, MSU, and Kentucky all the way down to the 9 line. Based off of this, Baylor, Texas, Nevada, Colorado on the 10 line, and then Florida, Grand Canyon making it as an 11 seed along with Providence, and then some play-in games right there. FAU, James Madison, Princeton, McNeese, Sanford, and I'm not going to go through the entirety of that list, but let's take a look at the actual bracket here. The updated bracket, you can see Purdue, number 1 overall seed, Indianapolis, so right at home for them. They would be facing St. Mary's or Ole Miss. That would be an interesting round 2 matchup, St. Mary's versus Purdue. But I think St. Mary's is just too offensively challenged to beat Purdue this year. The 5v12 matchup, San Diego State, UC Irvine. Yeah, that's a typical 12 over 5. San Diego State just doesn't do it for me. I know they made it, all the way last year. Last year even was kind of a fluke, honestly. Iowa State, Louisiana Tech. I think Iowa State will win that game. Oklahoma, Grand Canyon. There's another potential upset right there. Duke, Vermont. I like Duke. And then just taking a look at the rest of it, Tennessee and Drexel. Looking at the East, you do have UConn facing Quinnipiac, the pollster. Clemson versus Nebraska. That's a good draw for UConn. I think UConn would easily handle either of those 8 or 9 seeds. Kentucky versus Sanford. I think I would pick Kentucky. I think Kentucky can win a few games with their offense. Dayton versus Akron. Wow, an in-state battle there. And then just taking a look at some of those other games. Alabama as a 3 seed in this bracket taking on Morehead State. There is Michigan State taking on A&M. So that would be a tough draw for Kansas. You don't want to face Michigan State in the second round, but it is what it is. Moving on to the West, you can see North Carolina being shipped out west because they would be the 4th 1 seed. They don't get preference on where they go. They would be facing New Mexico or Northwestern. That's a good draw for North Carolina. I would certainly like to face it. Well, you could argue that New Mexico might be tough. Yeah, you could. New Mexico's an interesting team. Florida Atlantic, Appalachian State, 12-5 game. Not big on Florida Atlantic this year. Baylor, Cornell in a 4v13. Just looking at some other teams. Illinois versus High Point. High Point now up to the 14 line. And then Arizona versus Eastern Washington. They would face either Colorado State or TCU. That's a good draw for Arizona. I think that would be a lock, Arizona to the Sweet 16. And then looking at the South, you do have the Houston region. Auburn and McNeese in a 4v13. South Carolina and Indiana State. Yeah, I would pick Indiana State for sure. And then Indiana State would possibly face Wisconsin. Yeah, Indiana State would certainly make the Sweet 16 and possibly the Elite 8 because I also think they would beat Marquette if it came down to it. That's an amazing draw for Indiana State. That would be the god draw. You get South Carolina in round 1. They're bad analytically. You get possibly Wisconsin. I would think Wisconsin would beat Charlotte. And then you would possibly get Marquette in the lower region. So either way, guys, that is going to do it for this update. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.